I would like to start the introduction, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. And as we all know, we have Mr. Saurabh Bajaj with us today, a very, very special leader. And sir is the marketing head at Britannia for the dairy segment. He's recognized as one of the top 50 best marketing and communication professionals by White Page International. And he's also been recognized as a DMA Trailblazer Rising Star CMO. Mr. Bajaj has spent over 18 years in the field of sales and marketing and has worked for companies such as Mondelez, Cadbury, and Diageo before finally joining Britannia. Mr. Bajaj joined Britannia in 2017 as the marketing head for the Britannia International business, where he worked with several exciting innovations across Middle East and South Asia. Currently, Sir is working on an exciting mandate to scale up Britannia's dairy business across India and Bhutan. So you've worked for some of the most iconic and relatable FMCG brands that we've all seen while growing up. Personally, coming from a food industry myself, your journey right from Mondelez to Britannia is truly, truly aspirational. We are very, very excited to have you amongst us today, sir. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Arya. I'm looking forward to the chat. And, in fact, I've been giving, quite a few of these talks over the last couple of years. Actually, I started this entire journey of sharing my experiences, probably thanks to the pandemic, because the day that the first lockdown was announced in March, that's the time when I put out my first post on LinkedIn and it got 25,000 views. And I was like, wow, there are people out there who probably want to learn from my experience. So it was quite amusing for me at first. And then it, I think, became something that I took on a bit more seriously. I've, in fact, actually penned a book by this name called The Practical Marketeer. And hopefully we should have it in print in the next few months. So you'll get a much larger version of just this talk. This talk is probably like a sneak preview. Yeah. Now, as I did this journey of probably discovering myself over the last 2.5, 3 years, right? What I realized is that there's a large gap between what we learn about marketing in campuses or through books, right, versus how it is practiced in real life. And I hence have felt that, there is an opportunity to just connect the dots because, all of you guys will be probably already masters in theory. But if I can give you a glimpse of how some of those concepts are really practiced in a corporate world, maybe it'll be something that will add to all your, experience. Now, the way I'm planning the session is that I'm probably going to speak continuously for around 45 odd minutes, continue to put your questions in the chat box, and what I will do is once the discussion is over, like once I've taken you guys through this presentation for around 45 minutes, then the floor will be open for questions, expecting a lot of questions from all of you. The questions which you might choose to ask me could be on this deck, could be on, any general aspects of marketing. I usually avoid talking about my current company, Britannia, but otherwise anything from the point of view of, my career or how marketing really happens, it's all fair game. Yeah. So let me now get into the deck. Second. Mouse. Okay, great. Yeah. Now, a lot of, engineers, finance grads, a lot of people get into MBA and we always wonder what's marketing all about. It always seems so intuitive. Yeah, sure, there is alcohol in the journey, but that's not all there is. Yeah. Now, see, this is really the framework of marketing that we learned from Kotler. Right? It's basically about understanding the consumer, the marketplace, doing a lot of primary research, designing a customer-driven marketing strategy, constructing an integrated marketing plan, what we know as the 4 Ps of marketing, building a profitable relationship, and of course, capturing value from the consumer. Yeah. Now, this all looks pretty complicated, but very simply, these are just the 4 things that we do for any marketing process, right? As you go through a corporate, what you realize is the first question, which is very important for any marketeer to get its view on, is what is the brand task? And believe you me, this is not an easy question, right? Because this is not a question which is purely in the marketeer's domain. This is something which comes out of the company's strategy, right? It has to be the MD or the CEO which has to give the guidance as to what are we trying to solve for and what's the overall company strategy. From the company strategy emerges the brand task. And as I go forward, I'll explain what this means. Yeah. After we understand the brand task, next section comes, which is really what every marketer loves, which is about going out there and understanding consumers. Yeah. From there, we figure out what we want to say, and that's where, all the glamorous stuff with the ad agencies really happens. It involves a lot of brainstorming. There are formal processes to it, but really magic is probably what happens at this phase. Yeah. And finally, we deploy the mix, right? Now, this is about, you've got a strategy in place, you know what you want to say, you know how you want to say it, you already built in your campaign. So how are you going to execute it? And believe you me, the options for executing any strategy are more than just those that meet the eye. We often talk about digital, we talk about, shopper. What do all these terms mean? Very broadly from a corporate lens is what I'll talk about. Yeah. So now we talk about the first question. What is the brand task? Now, if you ask somebody what's a brand task, it looks very intuitive, right? We all want to grow our market share. We want to drive profitability. We want to, convert consumers, right? But again, like I said, it has to be something which bridges the gap between what a CEO of a company or a managing director would want to set out from the point of view of the investment from the principles, and how does a marketeer convert it into a brand opportunity. Yeah. Now, again, if you were to try to figure out tasks, if you went back to the Kotler, so you'll say, Kotler will say, talk about a frontal attack, an encirclement strategy, leapfrog strategy, flanking strategy. Often, I believe these terms are retrospective. You don't decide to do a leapfrog strategy. You look back and say, oh, what I was doing was probably a leapfrog strategy. But what you do need to align with your executive is, are we trying to grow in category or are we trying to steal shit? Yeah. Now, it looks very simplistic. Why only these two tasks? See, this really dawned upon me as I went through my journey, and I realized that consumers really don't care about our brands. They don't have any clue whether they prefer a Coke, a Pepsi, or a Thumbs Up. It's probably something which is very momentary. You are having a biryani, you probably have a Thumbs Up. You're ordering a Domino's, you probably order a Coke. You sometimes have, you might have a soap in your, bathroom, and you may not even be aware of when did you pick up that Rexona bar, right? So it's not about really a brand versus what the consumer wants to do with them, or what do you want to tell the consumer to do. Now, if you're a market leader, you'll tell the consumer, please have more of this. And that's really where growing the category comes in. If you are a challenger, you'll say, please have my brand versus the other guy. And that's where stealing share comes in. Yeah. And you'll have a lot of examples in both. So if you see grow category, right? In grow category, you will, see a lot of iconic campaigns. Really, some of the best stuff that happens, which we remember, which is very memorable for us, is typically in the grow category domain. Why is that? Because, when you want to grow a category, you really want to capture the heart and minds of a consumer to drive predisposition towards the whole category. A grow category task is rarely about buy Coke versus Pepsi. A grow category task is about why should you have Coca-Cola? Why should you have cold drinks? Right? And that's where, when I was doing my MBA in 2002 to 2004, in the summers of 2002, I was in Bhubaneswar, where I saw this strategy in progress. So in 2002, 2003, Coke had just introduced these 5 rupee Coke bottles at 200 ml. And believe you me, Orissa was exploding. I mean, that market was growing at around 80%. I mean, there was literally violence on the streets out there. I mean, there was. Yeah. Somebody's mic seems to be on a mistake, it seems. Okay. Let me continue. Yeah, I think some of you guys can go on mute who are not speaking, maybe. Yeah. Okay. So, and when I'm saying there was violence at the streets, I really mean it, because, there was attacks on distributors because they didn't have stock. There used to be lines a mile long outside. And why did all that happen? Why did that madness happen? Because, there was a two-poised intervention. At one time, you cracked affordability. So you got a Coke available at $5, which is unheard of till that day and age. I mean, when I was growing up, I only bought a 300 ml at $12. It was rarely ever at, say, $5 at a price point. Second, you had this proposition of Thanda Matlab Coca-Cola, which essentially means, you want to have buttermilk, juice, anything, any Thanda, you have a Coca-Cola, right? And that was really a very fine example of a grow category task. Dairy Milk has been doing Kuch Meeta Ho Jaye since 1995. Yeah, in the Indian context, is probably one of the most memorable lines, right? And what does it mean? It means that the $1 billion of mithai that you have every year, every ounce of that mithai can be substituted by this modern meetha, this Western snack, and that's dairy milk. Again, it works not just to grow dairy milk, but also to grow chocolates. The Domino's of the world the QSRs have really grown with their affordable meals, $25 for a burger, $100 for a pizza, right? They obviously get consumers from the guy who's probably thinking of having that dal makhani and 2 chapatis, right? Because for the same price now, he can pick up a pizza. Again, Chick Shampoo, when Chick Shampoo launched their sachet, and they then led the way for Clinic Plus and the rest to get their sachets in. A brand manager at Unilever was once quoted as saying that when we decided to launch sachets, we realized that just the sachets of shampoo sold by Chick had more volume than all other shampoo brands of Unilever put together. That is the degree of penetration that it drove, right? And that was a pure disruption. Clearly, it did something to get consumers from the Shikagais and the regular soaps of the world, and they got consumers from outside the category. So typically, the grow category task is about building relevance for the category itself and not a brand. It's about finding consumers from outside the category. It's a high investment strategy. It's usually a market leader strategy. The second task is a steal share task. In a steal share task, you essentially tell the consumer why you and why not the other guy. So, if you were to do a general Google search on Cannes winning case studies, right, you would realize that Whopper has won Cannes multiple times, right? And why does Whopper or the Burger King continue to do that? In fact, at one point in time, Burger King was criticized for only focusing on awards and not on the business. But why do they win so many awards? The reason why Whopper wins their awards is because they've been very provocative about mentioning their competition in their ads. They're very happy to say that, McDonald's is doing that, go get them, because they know that only when you consider a McDonald's, you would realize that a Whopper just tastes so much better. Yeah. So they're not really insecure about somebody moving over to a McDonald's, because once you have had a Whopper, you are rarely likely to go back because the experience is just such a delight. So hence, Whopper is very comfortable about taking on competition and saying that, hey, if you want to have a burger, have me. I'm the better guy. Similarly, OnePlus did this really well when they took the entire market away from, iPhone, and now probably Samsung is doing it to them. Yeah, because they said you got an iPhone at $75,000, I can give you the same features at 38,000. Yeah, go figure. So, steal share task can be driven by affordability, could be driven by value, could be driven by product innovation. Yeah. Fogg did this extremely well. What they simply did is they realized that there are two categories. There is perfumes and there is deodorants. Let me put some perfume inside a deodorant bottle, and hey, you got Fogg, right? You got a perfume in a bottle, right? Pretending to be a deodorant, right? And the sheer value that they offer would have put the Axe brand team into a tizzy, saying that, what, if we promote this product, our gross margin is going to collapse. What are we going to do about it? Yeah, and a business model shift is not easy to manage. Similarly, Mad Angus, what did they say? They say they launched their, bingo with the regular chips, didn't get as much traction. And then again, they realized that there are these two categories. There is Indian snacks, yeah, which is your khakras and your chaklis of the world. And then you got Western snacks. What if I put an Indian snack inside a Western snack pack and called it a Mad Angle? Yeah, could I sell them mini khakras? And I think they did that really well. So you'll realize steal share talks to existing category users. You got to tell a Lay's user that, boss, why are you having a regular Lay's? Have a khakra instead, right? So it talks to existing category users. It offers a differentiated benefit, and hence product innovation here is typically key. It is often a challenger brand strategy, is usually a lesser investment strategy, but they also operate at lower margins because you give some differentiated benefit to the consumer, right? But it is largely between these two strategies. And you have to first align as to what is the business you are in, what's your market share position, how much gross margins have you built in, what kind of money for ANSP for advertising do you have, what is the strengths of product innovation that you bring to the table? Are you looking at delivering a me too? Or are you looking at stealing share through a differentiated product? So the first things first, get your brand task aligned. And a brand task does not mean just ad. A brand task could mean occasions, like the way a Dairy Milk has done it with Pehli Tarikh. It could mean, absolutely new format. So Cadbury Celebrations is in some ways an extension of Dairy Milk. It could mean going in home with a product innovation. It could talk about, activating a Diwali and Rakhi. So it is genuinely the first step in the journey, right? It's not the end of it. The first step of the journey is to say, what is my brand task? And then you decide are you going to activate it? Okay. So now you got a brand task in place, right? You've fairly understood from your team, you got a mandate in place. You got some kind of resources aligned. You know how much money you're going to spend. You got a broad business model. You got a P&L in place. Yeah. Now you need to start figuring out who your consumer is, right? And understanding the consumer, because there's a large whole mass of humanity out there, right? It typically is about cutting the consumer into biteable segments, right? If we can cut the entire mass of humanity into segments in a manner that is correlated with the reasons for purchase, you got segmentation in. And that's really the next step. So the next step is about understanding the consumer. And probably, if there is any jargon which I still hold from my campus days, it's probably STP. I would say really useful and is really applicable, right? So segmentation, divide the market into discrete clusters. You target them, you figure out which one you want to go after. And then you do your positioning, right? And your positioning is keeping the bullseye in place, but eventually shifts the, entire mass of humanity, as I said. Again, I remember my class of segmentation, and my professor went on and on about geographical segmentation, demographic segmentation, psychographic, behavioral. And I was like, wow, this sounds like a lot of work. Yeah. And, as I entered corporates, I realized that this is the most exciting part of marketing. I think one of the most exciting parts of marketing is segmentation and then leading to the concept. But segmentation in corporates is often done by trying to understand what need states are. Yeah. And need states can be done in both ways. It can be done from a physiological, or really by the hard stuff, or it can be done in a manner which is more psychological, which is the soft stuff, right? You're essentially trying to reach the soft stuff because it's the soft stuff which is more clearly linked to needs. Yeah. But you need the hard stuff to figure out whom do you want to talk to, where do you want to go, right? So the hard stuff is really your demographics, your identifiers, trying to build a buyer persona profile, right? Essentially what happens there is that, if you are, say, in the cars category, you would realize that, one of the clearest ways in which segmentation for cars can be done is basis your outlay, because the cost is so much, right? And if the cost is going to be so much, a clear demographic variable is going to be affluence, right? People in the salary brand of, below 30 lakhs, 30 to 50 lakh onwards is a nice way of doing segmentation. Yeah. Similarly, for categories like juices, probably metros is a great way of doing segmentation, because you know that, you have a lot of business happening there. So you can do the first cut basis the hard factors, like I said, by your demographics and so on and so forth. But really where it gets interesting is where you have to uncover the onion, when you have to peel the onion and go beyond the hard stuff into the soft stuff, saying that, okay, I've got the hard stuff. I've got, maybe kids, teens, adults. I've got SEC A, B, and C. I've got all these cuts. But how do they think? How does the psychology change, right? And let me demonstrate this psychology piece with the example of a category which is functionally not differentiated at all. I mean, alcohol. I worked in Diageo. And in Diageo, the TG is the same, right? It's 21 LDA. Only people above 21 are going to be consuming it. But now I'm going to demonstrate how through a tool which has been developed by Kantar, right? They are able to do psychographic segmentation, which is really interesting. A lot of psychographic segmentation, which is about how we behave, right, correlates very nicely with needs, right? And if you want to try to understand psychography, or maybe if you've read anything of Sigmund Freud, you really realize it's about, your introvert self versus your extrovert self. It's about whether it's a social setting or a personal setting. And these two simple mental variables, an introvert versus extrovert and social versus personal, can throw up this interesting grid of 6 different need states. And if you were to do a Google search on need scope by Kantar, you'll realize that they have done this across categories, and each of them are extremely insightful. I mean, at one point in time, we were in a rut. We did not know how to crack Bonvita versus Horlicks. And that's the first time when in Cadbury's, we were able to use this segmentation to realize, where does Horlicks play, where does Boost play, and where should the Bonvita mom play? And that's what really led to this current campaign of, where the mother is running with the child. Yeah, it really came out of this framework. And that was done almost about 8, maybe 10 years back, right? Now, what happens in this framework is that, from this whole grid of extrovert, introvert, social, and personal, right, you come up with this need state on the right, yeah, which is about being friendly. Yeah, this is a need state where the psychography is affiliative, approachable, friendly. From there, you move to a carefree need state, right? And there is a dynamic need state. Yeah, there is an assertive, competent, and caring. Yeah. Now, what is really interesting is this understanding of this consumer. It obviously helps build a portfolio strategy. But how do various brands correlate to this? And how would we use this in, say, a Diageo? So the social need state, right? The social need state is really where beer is placed. Beer, rum, a lot of these brands that we have in college, and we have them in a circle of friends. We obviously don't have the cash to afford anything else either. Yeah, that's about the time when you are most closely, in an area of trust, right? And this also explains the McDowell's campaign of Yari. Why do they harp on Yari for affordable whiskey, right? Is because that is where most of the penetration of alcohol or of a lot of these hard drinks categories or even beer really starts from. Adjacent to that is where you have the carefree occasion. A lot of women drinking happens in this occasion. One of the reasons why in Indian context, often people consider Smirnoff a woman's drink is for this reason that, while men might start drinking with their college buddies, women might start drinking in a party, where you can just have a shot of vodka and nobody will know, or just mix it in your juice, right? And hence, a Smirnoff and a Magic Moments in all of their surrogates, they own the EDM festivals. They own the whole electronic dance music, the party space, right? Well, that's the space of being carefree, fun-loving, spontaneous, right? When I was in Diageo, and I would often talk to, we would often have this way of starting a conversation where we would start by talking about which is our favorite drink. Yeah. And a lot of the Europeans, a lot of the guys would always talk about Tanqueray. And I always wonder why. I mean, what's so great in gin? I mean, in the Indian context, we rarely ever have gin, right? Now, what's great about gin and things like wine is that a lot of category penetration of alcohol initiation in the West happens in a caring occasion. It happens in a circle of family members in, say, Christmas, where you're actually careful, caring, sensitive, right? Because gin with the codes of having botanicals mixed with alcohol has got a very normalizing kind of a code. Now, that doesn't happen in all culture, right? But it clearly happens a lot in the West. And that's why they love Tanqueray, because it brings them back to those memories. A lot of alcohol positioning is about the memories that we have had, right? And because gin evokes those memories, where they were their family, they were really comfortable, is why gin is such a popular drink outside of India, probably growing India. Now, American whiskey is really something which is being growing in a big way globally. Yeah. And if you picture an American cowboy, right, he's extrovert, but he's also personal, right? He doesn't want to mix in a crowd, doesn't need to mingle, right? He's happy with his Netflix. So, and that's what the millennials are, right? They don't want to be told what they have to do. They're bold, dynamic, they're independent, right? They're extrovertish, but at the same time, they are very clear of their personal values, and they don't want anybody to tell them the rules, right? And which is the reason why American whiskey does so well in current day times, right? Versus just a shade back, assertiveness was really the Gen X's were all about being assertive, right? And that's where Johnny Walker really played the game about, there were markers of progress. You start with a red label, now you can graduate to a black label. You can go all the way to a blue label, right? You're really assertive, you're forthright, you are marking those, times of your life. And right next to Johnny Walker, you have their favorite competition, Chivas Regal, which really focuses on being competent, about saying that's not just about progress, it's about how well you do it, right? And the fact that you got a great blend. right? So this shows how just by playing the psychographics game, right, you can have a space for multiple brands to target multiple cohorts in multiple occasions, right? And this is where I think the joy of segmentation becomes so interesting, because even as you understand the segment, you can start visualizing the potential proposition. Okay, so now you've got out there, you've done your segmentation, you've divided your consumers into cohorts, and you probably even figured out which of those cohorts you want to go after. You figured out the largest consumer segment, you understood what the psychographics are. Now you need to figure out what are you going to tell them. Yeah, and like I said, this is where the partnerships with the agencies essentially comes in. So again, when it comes to segmentation, or rather when it comes to positioning, and again, if one goes back to literature, you'll find category-based positioning, consumer-based, competition-based, benefit, price, attribute, prestige, right? But, when I have my direct reportees working with me and they say, okay, sir, oh, you understood the consumer, like in karna kya hai? Like, which consumer do I target? Like, which positioning can I own? And positionings can be infinite. So what do we do? So typically what I tell them to do is to create a 2x2 grid. And I always tell them any 2x2 grid will do. So if you want to launch a brand of furniture, figure out 2 axes which work for you. A furniture axis could be mass versus premium, simple affordability. Do it yourself versus ready-made. Yeah, you got 2 axes, right? And you can put everybody from an IKEA to your neighborhood furniture guy on that axis, right? So similarly for cars, for juices, for cheese, for any product out there, if you were to simply make an interesting 2x2 grid where the 2 variables seem the most intuitive in terms of what those brands are probably talking about in their campaigns, you'll find a way to place your competition. And once you've been able to find out the lay of the land and you've been able to get various positionings out there, you can get a whole strategy in terms of innovation or communication. And let me give you an example on how this pans out. So if we did a 2x2 grid for Dairy Milk in chocolates, and you say that, I am, say, the brand person with Dairy Milk, I want to build my innovation activation strategy, and I want to figure out what are the various positionings out there. So what I will do is I'll take any 2x2 grid, I'll place all the brands in the market, and I'll see maybe where does the inspiration come from. So I start from low quality to high quality. What does quality mean? All of them are good quality chocolates. It essentially means the percentage of cocoa content. So if you have very low cocoa, right, you have a wafer chocolate or you have gems. If you have very high cocoa, you have probably a dark chocolate, you have a green and blacks, right? Similarly, there is a pricing game. So there's a low price to a high price. When you lay these guys out and you say, this place of low cocoa, so lesser RM cost, maybe more affordable pricing, and a low price works for me. And, maybe I want to get after rural consumers. Maybe there is some kind of penetration job to be done. So what do I do? Right? And by looking at the examples of M&Ms, you can be inspired to launch Dairy Milk shorts and say that if that's what Kit Kat, if that's what M&M does, maybe have an opportunity with that. Yeah. You look at a Kit Kat and you get a Crispello and say, maybe I can, get Dairy Milk to enter a more premium wafer space. Similarly, on the other side, on affordable pricing, but high price, you can get a larger pack. So you can get a Cadbury Celebrations there, right? Or a family pack. You move upwards, you can try to take on a Galaxy, through a Silk. And you can go all the way to a Bonville. I mean, when Bonville was started, it was seen as a Dairy Milk innovation. In fact, 15 years back, Bonville used to be a variant, like a fruit and nut is of Dairy Milk. But because your positioning was so pristine and so premium, you realized that you needed to break the shackles of the Dairy Milk code, right? And it became a brand on itself, right? But all of these opportunities can simply come out as long as you use a positioning grid. You get a 2x2 grid and you put the landscape there. Now, so you got a consumer, right? You got a broad idea of your positioning, right? Now, how are you going to bring it to life, right? That's where a brand ladder comes in. And brand ladder is a fabulous tool. I use it extensively. Why is it so important? The reason why a brand ladder is so important is because it walks the consumer from what am I? So, what is the physicality of my product, right? Just hardcore, what am I? To why should you buy me? Now, if you remember, I talked about the fact that consumers don't care about our brands. They're not even aware of what brands they're using. Right? What they care about are the categories. So if you tell them an innovative reason to buy that category, you might find an interesting positioning for your brand. So essentially, if you see Coca-Cola, right, it starts by saying that it's got attributes of being an aerated beverage with a sugar rush. It's got a functional benefit of being able to release sugar, right, and that typically delivers an high. Yeah, all the sugar essentially evokes this feeling of happiness, right, and hence you're able to move to this societal benefit of global harmony, right. Now, all brands, if they go high enough, finally promote world peace. But and there's a reason for that, right? If finally, what are we in this game for, right? It's finally all about being happy, right? Bringing a smile to your face. So that's typically why universal insights work the best. Things like happiness spreads when shared, right? Used by so many people. But there has to be a unique link between what your product attributed. Otherwise, you're going to fall flat. Now, as I mentioned in the brand ladder, right? You have all of these functional benefits. You know your attributes. Your attributes is your product. You break down your product into attributes. Then you figure out your functional benefits. What does it work better? Helps your family, stays connected. These ladder to an emotional benefit. You feel optimistic, free, curious, and so on and so forth. Yeah. All of these, the entire brand ladder, right from attributes to the reason why it should be bought, is really captured in a concept. And believe you me, if I'm not doing segmentation, what I'm spending most of my time as a marketer is crafting concepts. Right, and concept crafting can take 18 months. You can do 6 to 10 rounds here, right? This stuff is difficult. It's not easy because you have to hold true. It has to be something that the consumer is genuinely interested in, and it's coming from a place where the consumer is, and not where your brand is, right? And your brand has to be in a very differentiated manner, deliver on that concept or that need. Yeah. So if you see this example, you essentially had the R&D team figuring out, boss, I've got a biscuit for you. It's got only 100 calories, 2 grams of fat, 3 grams of sugar. How are you going to sell it? Right. So you say, okay, so how does it taste? It tastes good. So you got the best tasting yet guilt-free pleasure. Yeah. And that is what helps you move from, what my product is, my attribute, to the proposition, which is try Grace cookies and find a way to stay healthy. Right, it finally moves it to a guilt-free pleasure. Right, that's really the job of the brand ladder. But when you have so many brands in the market, all of them saying the same thing, and your product might be undifferentiated from your competition. So what do? Right, if you've got a sugary aerated beverage, but you already have a sugary aerated beverage in the market. So what do? How do you create that place of differentiation? And what I've always found very intriguing is the fact that the only position that typically works well, is that positioning that your competition can't own. Yeah. So if you have a Coke who's saying, I'm the real thing, right? You have an equally large brand, Pepsi, which says, I'm the choice of the new generation. If Coke says, oh, I'm the voice of the new generation, and the simple question is, oh, then are you not the classic? Right? So you have to really find that Achilles heel in your competition's armory. Yeah. Same thing with Domino's. So you have a Domino's which says, I'll give it to you really, really fast, right? And Pizza Hut says that, I don't want you guys to have that cardboard that Domino's sells in the place of a pizza, right? In fact, they don't even have thin crust pizzas in their menu. They only have these deep dish pizzas, and they really talk about this whole all-stars meal, right? Similarly, if you have a really successful brand of soap called Lux, says this filmi sitaro ki pasand at $5 or $10. And what space does it leave for the rest of the ambience, right? And having worked with Wipro Consumer, I do know that 99.2% of all soaps are exactly the same, right? There is some flavoring and some chemicals, but not really much of a difference. You can have a Dettol which says something completely different and says that, yeah, sure, you might feel like a Bollywood superstar, but you may not feel all that clean. So if you want to be really, really sure that you're killing all the germs, you come to me, right? The differentiation is nothing, maybe a little bit of perfume, a couple of molecules of antiseptic, if at all, right? But you have a completely different positioning, right? And for two completely undifferentiated products, you have very different spaces to own. All right. So we have now done, 3/4 of our journey. So we have aligned and we figured out what's our task. We figured out our consumer. We come down to a bullseye segment. We have used that segmentation to arrive at a positioning. So we have a great segment and we got the right concept. Now we've also spoken to our advertising team who has given us this lovely positioning. And now we are trying to now get the rubber to hit the road, right? You're trying to go out there and make your marketing plan. So what do? We say, yeah, I learned about 4 P's of marketing, but you're not going to reinvent the product every time, right? There has to be something more to it. And hence the way these are translated in a corporate is really about advertising. A close cousin of advertising is consumer engagement, becoming all the more important in today's times. Then there is shopper marketing, and then there is innovation, right? Essentially, the 4 P's of marketing crafted in different jargons. Advertising, again, the most favorite part of any marketer, right? Simpler it is, the better, right? And this is really the one battle that every marketer has with their general manager or managing director, right? Every business guy will say, can you please also talk about my 5 rupees SKU, or the fact that I've got 20,000 SKUs, or the fact that I now have this golden colored pack, and you know what, my laminate is now that much stronger, right? But a marketer needs to continuously push back and say, boss, advertising is about one line. Yeah, just say one thing. Focus exactly on what does your consumer currently think about your product, and what do you want them to believe about your offer, right? What is that shift? And if you can figure out that entire shift in one line, you got a great ad. And hence, all the iconic pieces of advertising that you would have watched over the years, you'll not be able to remember a SKU or a functional or an attribute or a feature, right? What you will remember is that Silk only says, I'm the softest, creamiest chocolate, nothing else. That's it. I just melt well. That's all they will say. And Axe will say, you know what, you are candy for the opposite sex. That's all they will say, right? Or a Fevicol will say, boss, itna acha judta nahi hai. Right? Nothing sticks like a Fevicol. And hence, all iconic advertising is finally about how can you filter everything that you want to do on exactly one line. If you can come to one line, you are likely to make an iconic ad. By the way, Iconic Ad is a series that I've been working on LinkedIn. So feel free to check some of those episodes out where I explore a lot of them. Okay. Now, how is it different from consumer engagement? See, if you notice all these examples, advertising is about what I want to tell the consumer. Consumer engagement is about what is the consumer talking about and how do I participate in that conversation. So if you saw the COVID times, they were, manna for marketers when it came to consumer engagement. So consumer wanted to talk about, I want awareness. What do I have to do? Dove says, please wash your hands. What does Dove have to do with washing your hands? Nothing. Right, but that's what the consumer was talking about, and the consumer is happy to listen. Yeah, anybody can clear my head. Please feel free to do that. Yeah, if the consumer was getting bored and trying to celebrate home time, Parley says, please, why don't you play Ludo with my candy pieces, right? You're trying to figure out what to do at home, and you had Surf Excel saying "Daag ghar pe rahenge," right? Appreciation, gratitude was a big word. So consumer engagement. The only difference between consumer engagement and advertising is what do you want to say, and you tell it to the consumer. Consumer engagement is about what is the consumer talking about and how do you find a meaningful way to participate in that conversation. Don't expect consumer engagement to genuinely build brands. It'll give you a lot of talk value. It'll give you a lot of short-term benefit. It'll give you effective media spending because the consumer is already talking about it. It's likely to get a lot of reach. Yeah, but beyond saliency, it won't give you much. Could make your brand more interesting and intriguing in the long run. Right? But advertising is what really sells your product. Last, as we move towards the end of this presentation, we talk about shopper marketing. And shopper marketing is, again, specifically in many ways, is about helping the shopper buy stuff. So you can arrange the chocolates better. Consumer likely to move faster. If you have a market share, you would grow that category. It's about leveraging topicality. Football is the flavor of the season. Why don't you put some fixtures out there? But I think the most intriguing way to leverage shopper knowledge is the way Apple does it. It allows their stores to create a fantastical world, right, where the consumer can enter. The consumer can experience the brand world through their stores, right? So essentially, shopper marketing is about impacting the shopper, the guy who's going to be interacting with your purchase and bringing alive your brand world for them in meaningful ways. Again, innovation, like I talked about the fact that, innovation can be of various types. And if you have your positioning strategy in place. You realize which are the buckets you want to go after, who's that consumer, who's the target, what's the positioning. You can also bring it alive through innovation. However, of all the various types of innovation that I've seen, if I were to closely bucket into two parts, innovations that work, innovations that don't work. Innovations that work are those that enhance your brand's appeal to core users. Innovations that don't work is where you try to become the competition. Right? And believe you me, this is really common, right? A lot of innovation starts by, I want to steal from the competition, so let me just launch a Me Too of the competition in my brand. And let me give you some examples from Mondelez itself, right? So Gems is something that I was a brand manager of way back in 2008-9. Gem Surprise is something that I worked on. It did really well. Why? It made this whole Gems playful experience even more playful and bigger. What I was picking up the damages for when I took on the brand was Gems Fruity. It didn't work. Why? Because of the insight that, Gems is had by kids. Kids often consume chocolates during playing occasions. And in their playing occasions, they use sugar boiled candy. So basically, sugar boiled candy, fruity flavors, Gems Fruity. But if they want to have a sugar boiled candy, they'll buy a sugar boiled candy. They're not going to buy Gems. Right. And secondly, the reason why they buy sugar boiled candy during playing occasions is because they are thirsty. They want moisture in the mouth. Chocolate absorbs moisture. That happens when you're watching in front of TV. That is the reason why it didn't work. Yeah. Perk. Again, two interesting innovations. You made Perk more of Perk, made it more whey-free, glucose, and you have the blue one, which has been ruling the roost. You try to create this Ulta Perk, didn't work because it was something that the core users did not really enjoy. Yeah, something we did as a test market only in Tamil Nadu. Again, chocolates. What worked is this 2 rupees chocolates, even bigger gush, Meetha Bomb. What did not work is when we said, hey, when we define eclairs or caramel chocolate, candy, we also say Alpenliebe is there. So why don't we launch an Alpenliebe? And we'll call it Eclairs Crunch. If he wants to have an Alpenliebe, he'll have an Alpenliebe. You're not going to have an Eclairs Crunch, right? So when you try to become the competition, you lose. When you try to become more of what you are, you win. And hence, we come to the final slide. There are two key tasks which every marketer must choose for the brand. Do what they want. Do they want to grow the category? They're focused on stealing share. There are various types of segmentation. The simplest is by making age cuts. The attitudinal one is the one which is used most often. A simple 2x2 grid is a powerful way of mapping out the market, evaluating opportunities for extension, potential positioning opportunities for your consumer cohort. A brand ladder helps you uncover to take the consumer from where the brand is to why should she buy you. The most powerful positionings emerge from the only thing that your competition can't own. In making advertising, it's important to break down your communication to one simple line. And finally, innovations work best when you extend the brand core rather than trying to become the competition. So that's really at the end of it. And, it's a nice summary of, like I said, of an end-to-end process of how we essentially do marketing. Happy to take some questions now. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much for the amazing presentation, sir. A few of us are from the previous batch and we've already studied marketing, but looking at your presentation, it was all like a fresh perspective all over again. So it was as engaging for us. So we'll now start with questions. Okay, Vijay, you could go ahead.
Well, yeah, thank you, sir. That was a great presentation. So one question, how should a foreign company, established foreign company, approach another country's market? Because you have Apple. Apple is I'm taking a big name there. Apple has made groundbreaking advertisement in the US. It never tried to do the same thing for, at least not for India or any known major, any other country actually. So,
cool. No, good question. So let me try to address it in 2-3 different ways, because I think your question can be interpreted in multiple ways, right? First part of the question is, how should you extend your brand into a new market? Yeah. And, I got an opportunity to do that when I was the marketing head for international business, right? Typically what brands tend to do is to find the early adopters. right? And if you are somebody who is taking an Indian brand outside of India, the early adopters are likely to be Indians which are there, right? And you will first, ensure that your stock is available at arm's reach to them. Yeah. Next, you will find what is the next segment of consumers. So South Asians have got similar behaviors to us. That could be a great second cohort, right? And only at the third stage, you'll probably start targeting locals. But you will start by saying, where am I the strongest? Yeah. And similarly, in the case of Apple, they will first target those people who are well-traveled. Somebody who's already traveled to US, who's aware of my brand, who has seen some of my advertising. That's the first person that I will get after. Right. I actually wrote an article on Apple on this website called The Strategy Story, where I try to decode what has probably not worked in Apple's case. And, Apple has got a global market share of around 15%. In India, it's about 2%. Last 2 years, they actually doubled to 4% now. Yeah. Now, what I felt was missing for Apple and what they've done really well outside of India, even in Dubai, what they do is they really spread a lot of word of mouth by creating communities. So they have these communities where people can come in and learn how to maybe do photography with their phones, right? And they've done none of those initiatives in India. I think they've done nothing with regards to building a community by building a cohort. If you ask me, they've done extremely lazy marketing in this country, right? Yeah. And probably it is the laziness of their marketing that has led to the lack of success that they have had. I think if they were to stick to the same rules that they are stuck to outside, which is to say build a community, build word of mouth, have great quality products, build my Apple stores, start doing my manufacturing here and believe in the potential of the country, probably they would have done it really well. But I think for the longest time, they're just trying to do, imports. And now I'm not a fan at all of their strategy of SE and, refurbishing older models. I don't think that's a great strategy at all. I think that's probably the worst thing that can be done with a premium brand.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so Kajal, you could go ahead, followed by Surbhi.
Sure. Thank you, Arya. Thank you so much, sir, for presenting such technical terms in the marketing. That was the first time I was introduced to those things. But I'll go back to the very basic things, like we are going to learn these things. So I wanted to know what are the skills that are really crucial for a marketing manager to have. And let's say if we are lacking those things, how can we develop that in coming time?
Sure. So, it's ironic because, see, I love marketing so much that it is difficult for me to put myself in the position of somebody who doesn't. But interestingly enough, in an ideal world, I would have been a physicist. So I got a 97 in my class 12th in physics, and I was on my way towards becoming a researcher. I managed to land up in engineering, I think, which is the screw up that most of us do. And I realized that civil engineering has got nothing to do with pure science, right? And again, I try to figure out, where is it that I can find a large canvas of opportunity? Where can I potentially change the world, do groundbreaking work, do something which is very meaningful, very large, larger than myself, right? And that's where I probably stumbled onto marketing. I stumbled onto marketing in my engineering college itself in my third year. And then I decided that, marketing is what I'm going to do. And I think a lot of my attitude towards marketing was crafted not by my classes. It's not what I learned in class, but it is really the activities that I did. So I was a part of the marketing club. I was eventually the marketing secretary. I also created Utsaha, which was our marketing fair. I created a couple of games of marketing. I think marketing is all about application. And I think the high that you get in marketing is when you are able to think of something and bring it to life. So I think the best way to fuel your curiosity for marketing is by maybe seeing some Cannes winning case studies. But I think the joy of marketing emerges when you can experience it in a small way. And the ways to experience it, in my opinion, is, like I said, in, say, your college clubs, being a part of maybe trying to create a marketing case study, or hosting a lecture about the topic. As you get closer to the field, and when it becomes more real to you in terms of the cause and effect between I thought this and this is what happened, and see, I can see the correlation. I think that's when marketing really becomes fascinating.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. We will definitely try all that.
Sure.
Surbhi, you can go ahead.
Hi, sir. Thank you, Arya.
Hi, Surbhi.
So, sir, going back to your third or second last slide, where you speak about Mondelez and its product innovations. I just wanted to understand what are the factors that decide which is the best route to opt for, create a new product altogether to stay relevant, or reaffirm the brand legacy by reimagining the existing product.
Sure. Innovation is expensive. Innovation is expensive, is also risky. Because of that, I think you should only do an innovation when you are, willing to burn the bridge. You heard this story of this general who would burn the bridge for his army when they would get into battle, because there's no way back, right? And innovations hence only work when you really throw the kitchen sink at it, when you really, really invest behind it, when you don't give it any option not to succeed, because anything new will have a lot of skeptics. So you'll have a lot of people saying that, we don't have the money, this can't be done, that can't be done. And hence, if you want to make innovation succeed, you have to really burn your bridges, go all out, ensure you have senior manager approval, and you've done all your testing and you're really clear about it, right? But really building a brand has to be done every day. I mean, if I have a small pocket of money to spend, the small pocket of money for me will always be spent on saying that, can I build my core brand's health? Can I build its equity? Can I strengthen its distribution? Can I make it more accessible? Can I have smaller SKUs which might be required to drive more penetration? Because that's the bread and butter. That's always the easiest thing to do. And that's obviously the most useful thing to do in the longest run. And in fact, if you see case studies, you'll see brands like KitKat and Smirnoff, both of which have really lost their way because of too much of innovation. You launch too many new variants, too many new flavors, too many meaningless things, and the consumer finally got confused as to, well, this is not the gold standard experience that I enjoy, right? And that's really what diluted the brand, right? So hence, I think innovation is something, it's a two-edged sword. It feels like free money, and hence we all love to do innovation. But innovation is the riskiest thing that you can do if you don't, if you're not fully invested when you go behind it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Suraj, then Saurabh.
Thanks, Arya. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to know, so over the last 2 years, we have seen largely the prices of the products have remained same, but the packaging or the size of the product has reduced. So that could have led to a negative sentiment around those products, but that hasn't happened really. So does the marketing have any role in that, on that aspect, to probably make sure the product does not have that sort of a negative impact towards it?
Sure. See, as marketeers or as professionals, the first business that we are in is to make money. Yeah. And hence, if you have quality prices going up, you have to take pricing. There's no two ways about it, right? And you have to find that money. I mean, we used to have this principle in Mondelez in the early years where, our CEO had put in this mandate or this directive that we will only give half the cost of inflation to the consumer. And the other half, we will try to find through efficiencies, either through scales, through negotiation, and so on and so forth. So some kind of a principle like that is typically handy, where you say that, inflation is a must, I will have to increase my price, but can I only say pass on half of it? And other half, I try to find other ways to solve for it. Yeah. Now that's a good directive to do. Now, when you have to take pricing, pricing can be taken either by reducing grammage or by increasing the price. Yeah. Now, which of these two routes you want to take, right, depends upon the purchase decision hierarchy. There is a purchasing decision hierarchy for every product. Now, and by purchase decision hierarchy, what I essentially mean, it's a complicated jargon, but what it essentially means is, what are the factors that the consumer thinks of first when he is looking to purchase those items, right? Now, for a 5 and 10 rupee SKU, price is a far bigger, role in the purchase decision hierarchy. I want something at $5, it's coinage. Yeah, that's at that point, it is always more logical to reduce the grammage, but keep the price point the same. But that's something which is about 30 or 40 or 50 rupees. Now, at that point in time, the experience matters more. Am I liking the feel of the bar in my hand? Am I getting the right amount of dry fruits? I'm paying so much for it. Is it feeling worth it? At that price, at that, standpoint, is the grammage or the experience that is more important. So if you have a 30 rupees bar of dairy milk, moving that to 32 or 35 is not so much of a challenge. But if you have a 5 rupee bar and if it goes to 6 rupees, it's a huge challenge. So hence, in those areas where the purchase decision hierarchy is driven by pricing, you do grammage drops. In those areas where the purchase decision hierarchy is driven by consumption experience, you keep the grammage same, but you increase the pricing.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Saurabh, please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is, we see this many companies burn huge cash promoting their products through celebrity endorsement. So what's your view on promoting this product through celebrity endorsement? Will it gain market share or will it always do the trick? What is your view on this?
Sure. Now, celebrity endorsement, again, something that I've written extensively about. There's this, portal called Case Reads in which I've written a lot about this. But see, celebrity endorsements can be a double-edged sword, yeah, because, how good your ad edit is, okay? This depends on the ratio of BCR to CR. CR is creative reach, BCR is branded creative reach. For advertising to be effective, you need to get around 70% branded creative reach, right? That is 70% of the people who have seen the ad, they should say, this was the brand, yeah? Now, often what happens in a celebrity advertising is that you get very high creative reach. A lot of people remember, I saw a Shah Rukh Khan ad, I saw, a David Dhawan ad, or I saw, whatever else that might be, right? But there, the branded creative reach could seriously fall. If the celebrity which has been chosen has got nothing to do with that brand, it could well confuse the consumer as to saying that, which brand was it? I don't remember. I remember the ad. Yeah. Secondly, celebrity endorsements are expensive. So moment you put money in celebrity endorsement, you also drop the amount of GRP that you can spend. The sheer amount of money that you have for playing the ad gets compromised, right? So the presence of a celebrity should only give you that incremental reach or the incremental stickiness if it has to work, right? Yeah. But in my opinion, the most important parameter when you are deciding on a celebrity, if at all, is to look at the branded fit. And sometimes when you do a branded fit, you might realize that a much less expensive celebrity or not an in-trend celebrity can be a much better fit. So in this series of iconic ads that I talk about on my channel, the first episode which I had done was about an Ambuja ad which had Khali in it. Okay. Now, Khali is not an endorser that you won't even consider him a celebrity, right? But it's a brilliant fit for Ambuja, which had always shown the Sabu kind of a character. So as long as your celebrity choice is unique, differentiated, brings alive the brand proposition in a powerful manner, it is likely to be an add-on. If it is a celebrity which is in vogue, very expensive, has got no fit with the product, it's likely to detract. It's likely to drop your creative, your branded creative reach, and obviously not give you the bang for your buck in terms of your investments.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. So we have about 25 questions, and in interest of time, I think we could take a couple of questions right now, sir. And is it okay if we can connect with the rest of the questions offline? Does that work?
Sure. You can always, reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. It's a great medium where I typically engage with a lot of people. Yeah. But let's see how many questions we can take in the next half an hour. We still have half an hour.
Sir, I would just, hosting you, I would like to take the liberty to ask a question. So
sure.
Most of us starting out the course for this batch come from different backgrounds, and we come in from non-marketing backgrounds with 5 years of experience. So how would you say a person pivots their profile towards a marketing role? What are the 3 things that you would suggest we do to prepare better for a marketing role?
Sure. See, it's a bit of a challenge, and I'll tell you why it's a bit of a challenge. It's a bit of a challenge because, the way I define it, marketeers are nothing but entrepreneurs hired by companies to run their business models. Okay, our brands are nothing but vehicles of showing investment or showing a P&L. Yeah, that's what brands are. It's really a business setup, right? And there's a particular P&L to deliver. Yeah. Now, when you want to deliver that P&L, you need to figure out how to run that business. And in running a business, especially when it comes to FMCG, sales is typically a preferred medium. So hence, most people who want to have, say, be a marketing head in an FMCG in, say, 15 years' time, you typically start with sales, right? And that's a bit of a disadvantage to people with a lot of experience because you typically don't have the patience to do all that operations role, right? So that's a bit of a challenge to think about, right? However, in any industry or any company, a marketeer is essentially the one running the business. Whether you're in telecom, whether you're in IT, whether you're in IBM, right, or whether you are in a regular manufacturing firm, you have to get a handle on the business, and that's where your experience can come in handy. Now, you already have an experience, you have seen how it works. If you can visualize the entire business setup, you can be a good marketer. But marketing is not about making advertising. Marketing is about running the business model, right? And in fact, most of the joy that I have had in my career has come where I've, say, drastically shifted my bottom line. I mean, when I was in celebrations, there was this comment which my MD had made: why should we shut down the brand? Because the bottom line was -5%. In 4 years' time, I was able to exit at +12, right? So hence, see your career in marketing as that of an entrepreneur or as a business owner, and then figure out how does your current experience come in handy. What is that business that you want to be at the driving seat of, where you want to lead change, you want to lead the business trajectory. And that is where I think your past experience will marry with what you want to deliver on.
Okay, sir. That was a very detailed answer. Thank you.
Sure.
It would help a lot of us out here. Continuing, Shaunak, you can go ahead, followed by Riti.
Hello, sir. Thank you for the very informative discussion. I just had a question based on the example that you gave with the Clinic Plus sachets. When you're trying to achieve, greater or more or, any market penetration whatsoever, I mean, what are the steps you take to kind of make a more deterministic decision as to this is the strategy that will get me the penetration I desire, or is it more of a sort of like, you fire enough bullets and hope one hits the target? Like, what are the the proactive steps you take to make sure that whatever attempt you make, whether it is, a smaller pouch, like a sachet, or whether it is a slightly differentiated product, or, what do you do to make sure that your strategy is the accurate one for that particular product and that particular demographic that you're targeting?
Sure. So a good question. Now see, while driving penetration, one of the first things that we don't want to do is to dilute our P&L. Yeah, and that's not easy, because whenever it's about a smaller SKU, there's a particular satiation we want to give, and hence the risk of diluting our P&L is there. So first thing is, when you're crafting that offer, how do you ensure that it is gross margin neutral, right? Or it is only diluting the gross margin to the degree that works for you. Secondly, pricing is one of the most simplest levers. It looks very intuitive and everything. Sasta kar do, maal bik jayega, right? But oftentimes what happens is that, those SKUs don't really drive penetration. Like when we launched shorts, we were thinking the shorts will drive penetration. It was not. It was bringing in more frequency. So existing users were using shorts more as, and a new occasion when I want to pop it, right? The penetration is still being driven by Dairy Milk 5 rupees only. Yeah. So pricing alone may not be the lever. Often the lever to drive penetration might be more psychological. I have not thought about chocolate. Right? Which is where the right proposition, kuch meeta ho jaye, mithai to socha hai na, mithai ko replace kar do. Sometimes those propositions actually are far more logical and powerful in driving propositions than just innovation, right? So hence, penetration is not an easy task. More often than not, we think we're doing penetration, we're just driving frequency of consumption. Yeah. And you have to genuinely go to non-users, figure out what is that surrogate category that they're currently having. So what is your source of growth? How can you communicate that shift of that source of growth? And that shifting of the source of growth can come either through product innovation, pricing, communication, right? Or through a variant. So that's really the journey.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sure.
Riti, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. So it was a very interesting presentation, and we actually got to know a lot about marketing from here. I could see that there were lots of food products in this slide, and the food products have both good and bad side. Similarly, all products have both pros and cons, and marketing targets their customers and shows the pros side of the product. And it is actually important to attract the customer and beat the competition. But how can we balance ethics and marketing?
Good question, Riti. And there are various dimensions to this question. I mean, some of these questions are so good that I can do a full 1 hour talk on just them. But to really tell you about this, it's fascinating. But some of the best advertising that I have seen actually dramatizes the biggest weakness of the product. So when Cadbury Dairy Milk Silk was being launched, and it happened on my watch, we had some 26 rounds of script presentation. We couldn't find out the proposition. Isko premium bolna hai, isko romantic bolna hai, kya bolna hai? Right? And then after some 26 rounds of presentation, there's a guy called Shetty, who's a creative guy, and my boss, Nikhil. They were jamming along with the potential director of the film. And, over a bar, Shetty says, problem kya hai? Why, chocolate mein, what's your issue? He says, ki bhai, melt hota hai. So wherever we stock it, we just can't stop the damn thing from melting, right? And Shetty literally said, ki yaar, isi ko proposition bana dete. Let's make the proposition as its biggest weakness. So oftentimes, if you can figure out your product very clearly, and often its biggest weakness can become its biggest strength. Yeah, so that's really as an aside, yeah, because finally it's about differentiation. But to answer your real question, your question is really about ethics, right? And ethics is not an easy one to answer. And I think, one of the reasons why I often tell people, don't be too excited about working in a startup too early, work with big banners, because, how do you solve for ethics, or how do you really learn it? It's something that you'll need that experience in the corporate to understand. And believe you me, I'm no expert on it. It's every day you ask yourself the question. Yeah. Now, there are a lot of ethical marketing guidelines which consortiums of companies pull together for themselves, especially when they're afraid of litigation. It happens in the US a lot, right? So you have a lot of chocolate companies having this consortium saying that, we will not advertise to kids on kids channels, right? I often wonder, is that even relevant in the Indian context? Because, an average Indian has a kilo of Kalakand, but only 10 grams of dairy milk. So do I really need to worry about the 10 grams of dairy milk, right, in our relatively undernourished population? In fact, if we had 20 grams of chocolate, it'll only give him more carbohydrates, which is required probably, right? But I think the best way to watch out for the consumer and be ethical about your choices is to try to do it in a community, because you're always otherwise watching over his shoulder. Yaar, main kar raha hu, dusra to nahi kar raha hai. But if you have these community bodies where all of these marketeers or companies come together, and together we decide what's right for the consumer, what's right for our business, because eventually the right choice will always be profitable. It'll be, we cannot make money by doing wrong things, right? And when you decide it together, yeah, that's typically when the sane heads are thinking, and you are less worried about watching over his shoulder and genuinely doing the right thing.
Thank you, sir. That answers my question.
Sure.
Arush, please go ahead.
Thank you, Arya. Thank you, sir, for the session. I had a question related to marketing decisions. These days, they are based on a lot of analytics which is available on consumers. So I was actually hoping that you could share an experience where the research that was coming about for the consumers was not really aligning with the vision that the marketing heads had about their brand. So what do we do in situations such as that? And if you could share such an experience.
Sure. Data is really important. And as marketers, we are storytellers, right? Our job is to weave a story by the diverse pieces of data that we see. Often the pieces of data are contradictory and conflicting with popular knowledge, because we're not seeing the full story, right? It's the whole case of 5 blind men and the elephant, right? You see the tail, you see the trunk, you see the things separately, and you obviously feel that, boss, this is all contradictory, not making sense, right? So the only time when it does make sense is when you see the entire piece together, and for that you need multiple pieces of data. Some could be abstract data, which is just done by a dipstick. Some will be done by authoritative piece, right? But data is always insightful. Yeah. Now, one of the examples where I use data, and that data led to me a lot of insights which were not there in my head when I started looking at the data, was when I was trying to do segmentation. Right? When I was trying to do segmentation for a consumer products category, I kept thinking that this consumer product is very premium, had in top households, so I should find correlation with affluence, right? But I was not finding the correlation with affluence. So I was like, maybe there is something else. So should I look at age? So I started making age cuts. Again, the data was coming as contradictory. And then I realized, and then, again, I took the data, I did some segmentation, met consumers, tried to revalidate, not making sense. What I then had a hypothesis by meeting consumers, by saying that, maybe it is not the age of the consumer or the affluence. Maybe it is the age of the child, because a child is a large trigger for that particular category. And then again, and the age for which a mother has a child could be 20 years, could be 40 years also. But all of the moms who have got a child of the age of 5 years were buying my product more. So the product penetration is happening as a problem solution for a mother who's got a small child. Now, that was the insight that came out when I interrogated the data multiple times. If I simply looked at the data by age cuts and said, this is contradictory, is not making sense. Right? So hence, oftentimes, data is not just about data is giving you an answer and it's contradictory. It's about, are you asking the right question? If you're asking the wrong question, obviously the data is not going to make sense.
Thank you, sir, for that. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
So, Tarasha, you could go ahead, followed by Bharat.
Thanks, Arya. Thanks, Saurabh, sir. So, by going through your presentation, we saw that a lot of how marketing is done for consumer goods and retail industry. But a lot of people among us come from IT backgrounds. So when we build products, we do a lot of similar things, like we build user personas. We do segmentation before building our product. We understand the market psychology. We understand user behavior before building our products. So how do we plan marketing strategies are different when we think of IT products, software products, than consumer goods?
Sure. So Tarasha, while like I said, I have not done marketing in an IT, right? But I think the fundamentals of marketing don't really change. Like I said, even when I've written articles on, say, Apple, or try to investigate other diverse industries like, say, automobiles, right? Most of the time, I found that the tenets remain broadly the same, right? You have to largely start by mapping out the consumer landscape, how technology as a disruptor is going to change certain trends, how is going to be more valuable for one cohort versus the other. And again, like I said, marketing is really about running a business. So what are my areas of strength versus my competition? How do I figure out a positioning which, I can really deliver on, so for example, Domino's versus Pizza Hut. If one guy is talking about convenience, how can other guy be the one which is giving the more wholesome experience? So similarly, if there is a IT player which is really about frugal marketing, like say Samsung, you'll have an Apple on the other end, which is about a brand building. Right? And how does the interplay happen? What is that entire 2x2 grid? What is the landscape? How are you differentiated from your consumer? How can you really, make that difference? Again, when I was in alcohol, because alcohol has got so many restrictions of what you can do, what you cannot do. One of the books that I found extremely valuable was Byron Sharp's How Brands Grow. I think that's a phenomenal book, and it's probably a Bible for the current century, and maybe that will answer a lot of your questions, because what Byron Sharp does or says, he actually dispenses with a lot of conventional marketing. He says positioning does not exist. He says segmentation doesn't exist. He talks about mental availability and physical availability driven to the creation of key brand assets. And that's a lovely book, because I found that as a very diverse take to everything that Al Rice and Jack Trout had been telling me. Right. And that probably helped me, complete the 360 of how marketing can be looked at. So maybe if you read Byron Sharp, it might give you a few more insights.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, sir.
Okay, Bharat, you could go ahead next.
Thank you for such an insightful session. My question is related to cross merchandising. Which is with respect to one of your points in your slides that said understanding the customer. I feel that cross merchandising exists in both food and clothing sector. In food sector, one of the examples that you gave in was for Domino's and Coke or Pepsi. And for clothing sector, I would say that if I just go in to buy a shirt, they may have placed a trouser and an overcoat together as a single set, but all of these articles are priced separately. So do you feel that company trying to push and promote impulsive buying in customer is ethical as a brand responsibility?
Sure. So, one of the fields of marketing that I've really enjoyed is shopper marketing, right? And really, how does the shopper behave? So in the shopper marketing paradigm, we essentially have the 5S framework. So see, scan, spot, show interest, select, right? And that's really about trying to understand the shopper journey. And, typically whenever we have this question as to, how does buying really happen? What does the consumer do belong, right? The most important thing is to enter the occasion. So if you spend a couple of hours watching a consumer shop in his store, you'll get a lot of insights there. In fact, there's a book called How We Buy by Paco Underhill, which covers a lot of these insights, right? And if you can understand how the shopper journey is happening, you'll get a lot of ideas with regards to
there seems to be some issue with your audio. We lost you in the middle.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, sir.
Okay. So I was talking about Paco Underhill and how brands grow. There's a lot of learning which is there in terms of understanding, uncovering the shopper journey, and that can help you understand a lot of these things. But essentially, one of the things that we did in Mondelez is that we defined the names of brand manager from a manufacturer-led discussion to a consumer-led one. So we said there should be a brand person for kids and for adults and for teens, rather than for celebrations, gender, so on and so forth. So hence, in that sense, the question that you asked with regards to should the same brand person be driving shopper trousers, shirts, etc. Consumer-driven definition like that could probably solve for it, right? So I think there were two ends to your question. One is how probably should the brand marketing team be structured, and how does that whole cross-merchandising work? I think I've tried to address both of them.
I would rather ask that is impulsive buying promoted by, the impulsive buying that the company promotes, is that ethical? My main crux of the question was this part.
We learn this thing of needs and wants, right? Need is where there is only planned purchase, there is no impulse behavior. Yeah. And that's when you sell atta, dal, chawal, chai patti. Right? At that point in time, there is no emotional benefit imbued into the product. It's pure functional benefit. Those products sell really cheap. They're very utilitarian, and very little brand differentiation happens. And margins are single digit. All of marketing or value creation, as we move to the impulse side, is about imbuing that functional product with want. Want is nothing but emotional differentiation. As you build in prestige, as you build in, you're going to feel good about it. For example, the way you would carry yourself, say the way you do your hair, the way you do your, all of this is pride. The pride is the emotional benefit that the company puts in, right? And hence, I don't think it's really about ethics, because finally it's about catering to needs and wants. The way you cater to need is by providing largely functional products with limited differentiation. The way you build in emotional differentiation, or you build in the want sector, that is largely impulse. So whether it is at a storefront by saying that, buy two, you get this free, or by the way Levi's does it experiential, saying it, pay this much more, and on your jeans, I can put those original rivets, or the feeling of, really enjoying yourself at a store. All of these things are the stuff that us as marketeers imbue, right? We imbue a good experience. We build that emotional differentiation, and arguably that's what brings value to our lives, right? What's life without impulse?
Thank you. That answers my question.
Sure.
So we have amongst us an alum. So we have Ayush Kumar from the 2021 batch. He's here with his special question for you.
Sure.
Hello, sir. I'm glad to finally have you here.
Hi.
Sir, my question is, it's very interesting that you mentioned Byron Sharp's How Brands Grow. So I read that recently, and I found a lot of what the book said counterintuitive to what we've learned. And basically what the book is saying, where it says the customer is largely brand indifferent. So you should focus on basically distribution and gaining market share through selling. So how do we reconcile that aspect with the sort of larger perspective, the trend towards brand development, incorporating sort of user personas? Whereas the book is just like, jo dikhta hai, bikta hai, focus on distribution, focus on selling.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating book. And, while you're right, a lot of those things do look counterintuitive, but as you interrogate beyond the surface, you realize it's not very different. And, there is another book which is adding one more dimension, which is really the flavor of the season right now. It's all about brain science. So you would have found that in recent times, in the last maybe 5 years, there'll be at least 10 books which have come up on this new subject now. The one which I read was called Right Between the Ears by a guy called, I think, Prasad Chandra in the UK, who says that there is something called System 1 and System 2, where System 1 is really the emotional, intuitive decisions. You see it, you buy it. And System 2 is the interrogative part of your mind, which asks questions, right? Now, in my opinion, brain science is between Byron Sharp at one end and Kotler at the other, because Kotler talks about positioning and segmentation and everything is very fuzzy. Byron Sharp says everything is physical, मतलब दिखता है, key brand assets, अपना brand हर जगह दिखा दो, right? But brain science marries the two. Brain science says intuitively, why would he pick up? Right, is because of the positioning, and the interrogative part of it, the logical part of it, is where the part 2 comes in. So I think the more we read, the more questions, the more understanding we get, and the more we try to see the same answer from multiple lenses, we get, various more views into the, meaning of life probably.
Right, because during the MBA, we focus entirely on how Kotler basically does everything, and it's very Kotler focused. And then Byron Sharp is like a direct attack on Kotler.
Yeah, it's more business oriented, which is why I quite love the book, because I think they both are very complementary, but they all give you different sides of looking at the same thing.
Right. Thank you.
Aishwarya, you can go next, followed by Ankit.
Thanks. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Thanks, Arya. Thank you, sir, for your session. So actually, I wanted to ask about something which is a norm right now, which is influencer marketing, and almost every other product and every other brand that we see is being marketed through influencers. And but at the same time, we find that there is sort of a increased awareness among consumers about what brand they consume, about what products they consume, and also around paid partnerships. So in this scenario, where influencers are trying to sell through these posts or reels, and consumers also have an awareness of these things, so how do you think a marketer goes about positioning their brand and gaining that consumer trust?
Sure. No, fair point. I think the whole rise of influencers has come by this whole, norm towards authenticity, and the fact that if it's a micro influencer, the more credible it is likely to be, right? While a large influencer is more like a celebrity, it's like a media to reach a large number of users, right? So I think they're working hand in hand, because at one side you have the rise of D2C brands like Mama Earth and Wow Cosmetics using influencers, using the whole evolving paradigm of purchase, right? At the same time, you have a pushback to these same brands by people saying that, they're trying to be goody two shoes, but they're really not very different. So I think it's a natural part of our evolution, right? Currently, digital is definitely growing very fast, but it is being used like a conventional media device. It is being used as a way to get reach and frequency. I mean, there are a lot of hard metrics to why people are using digital rather than a soft metric of the fact that, is it more authentic? Yeah. So hence, I think it is a evolving thing. We take various steps as new things emerge. The metaverse should bring in even more new opportunities. But at the heart of it, it all remains the same thing. It's about the business you are running. It's about how good your product genuinely is. And you cannot fool anybody. You can't fool the consumer for sure. You cannot sell them a bad product. The product is where it all eventually starts, right? And then it is about figuring out, how your proposition is so differentiated and what are engaging ways of delivering that partnership. And it is rarely ever an or. It's always an and, saying that, let me do a digital to add to my regular TV reach. Let me also do some influencers to get some buzz and talk value. Maybe I'll get some additional PR. It's rarely an and, saying that let me only do influencers. You just have one more new medium. You are happy to have it in your repertoire of offerings.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. Sir, my question is related to sustenance. So you have displayed over a large number of examples, and I would like to add that once upon the market was captured in mobile segment by Nokia, then it was taken over by Samsung, and now we are seeing that a major portion chunk of the Samsung has been taken by OnePlus.
So what do you think should be the strategy for sustenance in the market? Be it your FMCG, electronics, or automobiles, any of them, what would be the strategies for sustenance?
Sure. No, it's a good question. See, I'll tell you, it's always a challenge because, when you build a business strategy, the way to build a business strategy is to first break segments, then plot the growth of those segments over a 5-10 years, which is crystal ball gazing. You cannot never be fully right or wrong. Then it is about saying how much share do I want to take in each of those segments. When you decide the share in each of those segments, then it comes to your profitability. Now, your existing segments are always intensely profitable. A new segment needs a lot of investment. So when you are trying to balance the bottom line that you have to earn, you tend to want to have higher share in your existing segments. And that could destroy your business. When those smaller segments become very, very large, you might end up losing your business. So the reason why Kodak never did as well in digital cameras is because they said, what happens if you lose all my gross margin of my digital sales, of my real sales, or why Axe fumbled and said that if I want to go down the road of a fog, I have to give so much of liquid, it's going to destroy my PNL, right? What do I do about it, right? So it's never easy, right? It's always about striking the right balance between innovation and holding your core. You have to build a core. You have to have that pot of gold to keep working on those innovations. And hence the right innovation philosophy is very important. See, innovations are divided into 3 kinds of innovations. There are extend innovations in which you get more flavor variants, where you just engage the current consumer. Then there are typically extend, then you go into disrupt, and then you go into a paradigm shift. Now, a paradigm shift kind of innovations need a lot of money, and you need to do maybe 1 or 2 of them every 5 years, right? In the mobile industry, it happens much faster. So I think it is about the technology leap and being able to be judicious about your spends. As long as you have a good innovation philosophy, you're not letting your core get diluted. You are taking 2 or 3 big bets, and then how good those bets are will finally decide on how sustainable your strategy is. But it is, I think it's the reason why all these executives get all that cash is so that they can keep working on it and making the right calls.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Avinash, you could go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Arya. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful session. When you were speaking about iPhone, with its SE strategy, which is not a very viable option for a premium brand like an Apple. So isn't it a good option to capture a wider market section and lure get the people into the ecosystem and then sell its premium pieces to the customers?
Good question. But see, it's all about strategic clarity, right? And the simple metric, and all this data will be available on Google if you were to do a Google search. If you were to Can you hear me now?
Yes, now.
Okay. So I said, if you did a trend line over the last 15 years of the share of profit of the smartphone category that Apple owns, right? You will find that it has been diminishing. It has gone from 93% to around 70-odd%. And if the strategy is successful, could collapse to 50%. So you're getting top line, but you're diluting your profit pool, right? And finally, in my opinion, the right gauge of a business model is what share of the profit of that category can you consume, right? You can sell a few units and get a lot of profit. You can sell a lot of units and get a little bit of profit. It's the choice that you need to make. Yeah. Now, the reason why I'm not happy with Apple's decision on SE, because it seems to be is contradictory to its current strategy itself. To its philosophy. Do they have the right to take a lot of profit at that part of the pie? Aren't there so many more competition? And how is the brand helping them? Versus how much they are losing on top, right? Now, it's only my gut feel to say, or, basis the data that I've seen, that I feel that this is not a great strategy, but then time will tell.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, so I'm still really amazed how we have over 20 more questions.
I can do another 10 minutes if it helps.
That's perfectly great, sir. We'd be having like a class scheduled around 5-ish.
Sure.
So if it's okay with you, if we could just take 4 last questions, does that work?
Yeah.
we'll just pick randomly. Monica, you could go ahead, followed by Shayan and Kumar Gautam and Arnav.
Sure.
Thanks, Arya. Hi, sir. Good evening. Thank you
Hi.
for the wonderful session. So my question is that now we are seeing the number of consumers who nowadays focus not just on a product's pricing, qualities, or features, but also keep sustainability as one of the key considerations. But that portion of consumers is still a relatively lower number. So what do you think, how can marketers play a role here in driving that change in the consumer's behavior so that people adopt the sustainable products more easily?
Yeah, so it's not an easy call, frankly, Monica. It's tough. Yeah, in fact, just today on LinkedIn, Britannia talked about the fact that we now have zero plastic across our distributors, suppliers, etc., right? Now, all of these practices typically come at a cost because you could be cost uncompetitive versus your competition. You could lose out in a price value equation. A consumer might actually value some of those inputs, so it's not easy, right? And hence, like I said, my advocacy is more towards building consortiums, because I think we all think more logically when there are a large number of people thinking together rather than trying to think individually, right? And I think the government has also been really proactive in taking some of these calls. A lot of these calls are actually top down, unfortunately, because there is a gross margin challenge. There's a profitability hit that corporates are typically driven by, right? And hence, often only when the government really pulls in their punches and says that boss, this has to be done, is when I think these are enforced rightly, right? But like I said, a lot of us are expected to be enlightened, and we are, as long as we come together in terms of bodies which think together. I think these calls are far easier to take, and when you make these decisions together, I think you are able to navigate the entire ecosystem in a lot more sustainable direction.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session. I had a question regarding societal backlash. Like, if your product is not doing well and there's a lot of backlash that comes into your product, so how do you cope with that? For example, if like a few months back, Ronaldo endorsed water over Coca-Cola, so their shares went down. So how would you comply with that kind of a backlash, because that is deteriorating your market value?
Yeah. See, I'll tell you, a consumer backlash is often only the tip of the pyramid. See, if there is something fundamentally wrong about a business model, about where you're going, and if you're not in terms of society, that backlash is waiting to happen. And no matter how smart a marketer or wily marketer you are, you can't finally do something wrong and get away with it. Doing bad things is not good business. Let's be very clear about that. Right. And hence, I think it is very important to acknowledge it, not just as the backlash, but to get to the root of it and say, is there something fundamentally wrong with my business strategy? So interestingly, if you go to the Coke website, what they talk about the fact that in 2011, 93% of Coke's business would come from aerated carbonated beverages. It's already down to 70, is likely to hit 50 in the next 5 to 7 years. And hence, logically, as a strategy, they decided to move away from aerated beverages and go into more functional beverages like energy drinks, juices, and so on and so forth, right? So I don't think it is about solving for a backlash. It is about getting into the grassroots of the problem and fixing it. One of the other bigger case studies where there was a huge backlash for Cadbury's was in 2003, when they got Amitabh Bachchan to save the thing with the whole insect controversy, right? See, what happened is the distribution of Mondelez and Cadbury's then had gone to 1 million outlets, right? The packaging was just not secure enough to manage those next, 3 lakh outlets, right? Because when you go down to that outlet cadre, you have the exposure to elements is far, far more. I mean, you could be lying next to a bag of grains, which could have, you could have aerobic bacteria which could get inside, right? Which could lead to the worms. It may not be the fact that you're manufactured with worms inside. It's just that you're not kept a packaging in line with the distribution growth, right? And sometimes that's a wake-up call for them to renovate their packaging and renovate their wares.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir. Thanks for the insightful presentation that you gave. It was very informative. My question, am I audible, sir?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So during the presentation, during the end of the presentation, there's a term you used, the voice of the customer. So what is the exact way to understand what exactly is going in the consumer's mind? Can you just put some light on that?
See, a lot of the understanding that I've got about marketing is by spending a lot of time with consumers. Yeah. And the interesting part is, like I said, my biggest learning as a brand manager when I started my career, when I met consumers, is the fact that the consumer doesn't care a damn about our products. Doesn't know about a brand, doesn't really care about anything. Yeah. He's living his own life. It's our job to understand the consumer. Right. And hence, when I meet consumers, I am really not interested in asking any questions in regards to my brand or category. I'm typically interested in understanding their brand worldview. How did they grow up? What were those values then? What changed? What is currently important? Right. And then if you see some of the most iconic advertising that has come up in recent years, it really reflects that. Right. So in 2004, 5, 6, rather 2008 to 12, right, the most clutter-breaking consumer campaigns was Cadbury Celebrations Is Diwali Aap Kise Khush Karoge. Nescafe was then doing something called Know Your Neighbors, and Good Day was doing Smiles with Deepika Padukone. The reason is it was a decade post liberalization. Suddenly, we all had money in our wallets, and we had become insular as a society. We had stopped spending time with our neighbors. And there was this gap in society which brands noticed and put their propositions around. Yeah? In the last 5-7 years, you're suddenly talking about hustling, doing multiple things, doing lectures with external faculty on a Saturday or a Sunday evening, right? So in this hustling culture, suddenly this whole thing of, I don't have time for myself, or I have to move very quickly. And you can see that coming out in campaigns. So you have this Nescafe campaign of make the most of every moment, that coffee is a fuel to fuel your lifestyle. You have a campaign which is about Vodafone idea. V is about speed se bado, right? And then you have a counterculture of 5-star saying do nothing because they're realizing it, right? So often brands which really speak true and they make the most difference are those which can tap into what's going on in society right now. And that's about understanding the consumer and society rather than only trying to figure out how to sell my brand.
So basically, it is a ever evolving thing. With the passage of time, every time you have to go to the consumer and you have to see what is going in his mind, and you have to make your strategies accordingly.
That's the only way I get paid, dude.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. Thank you for your insightful session. And I was wondering about the digitalization impact in the marketing in the future, because AI is around the corner, and there are a lot of predicting models. And as you mentioned that when you are doing this marketing, there are 4 corners that you pick up, like advertising, then consumer engagement, then shopper marketing, and innovation. So my question to you is that how this digitalization is going to play in next decade in terms of marketing? Like, will it predict that which area we should focus, or how it will? What do you think, sir?
Sure.
Forward.
See, digital is only a medium. Digital is only a medium to do something, right? Which is why you would realize that in those 4 quadrants, there was no word of digital there, right?
Yes.
Because digital is only a way of enabling it. Digital is a way of enabling me to do advertising. I can do advertising on TV. I can also do it on YouTube, right? It's just about the cost at which I can do it, right? Engagement is a new thing which has come up. Consumer engagement in the past was done by Amul on billboards for the last decade, where they would talk about what is the flavor of season in politics, and they didn't need digital to do that. They could just put very topical hoarding and still engage the consumer. Now, digital gives us an opportunity to engage the consumer faster. So like I said, there is only engagement and then there is advertising. You have to choose which one you want to do. Digital is an enabler for either. Yeah.
Thank you for answering that, sir. And with that, we come
We
to
can just
the
take, I think, Gagan Bajaj. I saw my namesake there as well. So if he still has a question, I can answer that one as the last one.
Okay, do we have Gagan here?
I think he has exited maybe.
Sir, can I ask a question?
No, sorry, I'm here. Sorry. Actually,
one last question.
Yeah, so actually, just wanted to ask you one question, sir. So what happens if marketing goes terribly wrong? Like we saw what happened with the perfume company yesterday, and Information and Broadcast Ministry has actually asked them to take out that advertisement. So what really happens with them?
Yeah, no, that's a very sad case study. I mean, I was myself really unhappy to see what those guys had done. I'm sure they would have had some intelligent people, but they're really screwed up, no doubt about it. See, one of the partners in our marketing organizations that, we as marketers love to disdain is really the consumer insights team. Right? We typically say, boss, I'll call you when I need you. And we hence typically rule a lot of protocols. And personally, I'm a big fan of insights because while they can be a pain in the ass for marketers because they will more often than not say, boss, you can't go ahead. But I think there is always a due process that one can follow. And if you follow that process, you will not make this mistake. You'll typically know ahead of the curve when you're doing wrong. Typically, these mistakes are made under deadline pressures of saying, boss, the gun to your head, abhi 2 ghante hain, abhi chalani hai, and you don't do your testing, you don't do your groups, you are not in touch with really what's going on. And those mistakes can be really costly. And hence, I'm always a fan of saying that, yeah, urgency and speed is good, but don't burn your company while doing it.
Okay, sir. So what happens next now, like with the company, with the manager who approved that, and what all things can happen? So are those people liable for the government action, or the company itself is liable for the action? Like what happens in this case now?
Say somebody who got out of this trap and who did it really well is probably Facebook. Where they happily distracted everybody from all of the Facebook controversy by simply changing the name to Meta. And, starting this lovely conversation around metaverse and ensuring that we all completely forgot about all the Facebook controversies, right? So I think there are ways about it. Of course, litigation will take its own course. And I think they will have a few cases against them. Typically, the person who is responsible for these cases is the managing director. I mean, with power comes great responsibility and penalty as well. So I think there will be challenges which they will face. Internal ruckus, jo hoga, wo hoga. Hopefully, there will be a bunch of nice people only. So I hope the world is not too harsh on them.
Thank you for the answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. You've really answered. Thank you, first of all, to answer all of these questions so patiently. Right from the first one to the last question, you've answered each of our questions with as much flair and as much spontaneity. So a special thank you for that. Sure. And formally, on behalf of the batch, I would like to thank you for this amazing and fantastic session. I'm sure that we would all agree that this session actually brought in a very different perspective around marketing. Marketing, not just in terms of what we see in books, but being very practical about it. We understood what things stand out, right from psychographic segmentation to concept crafting. I think those were the highlights for the session, at least for me. And once again, sir, a very big thank you for meeting us on a Sunday afternoon. It's already evening now, but thank you so much for sparing out this time and meeting us today.
Great.
We're really grateful to you.
Keep following me on LinkedIn. I love creating a lot of content, and look forward to my book, which will be again called The Practical Marketeer, where essentially I'll talk about not what marketing is, because I'm sure you guys know that, but how marketing is done. So look forward to that. And I really enjoy these sessions. So all the best to all of you.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll definitely reach out to you. I'm sure all of us have a lot of unanswered questions still, but we'll definitely follow you and take those up offline.
All right. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye, guys.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
sir.